This is the miter saw. This one's a compound miter saw, which means it can cut in 2 angles. The miter saw is your most useful tool. You'll use this one the most often. It's for quick cuts of lumber. We're cutting sticks of lumber down to be our frames of our flat or frames of our platform. This is the tool we're going to use. It's great for cutting 90 degrees. It's great for cutting angles. It's the general purpose tool that you need to do a lot of different things. You can make some of the cuts that you can cut on this saw on other tools, but they require a little bit more setup, and this is going to be the most accurate tool for cutting your sticks of lumber into various lengths.
Safety glasses are required and must be worn at all times. All saws require safety glasses as minimum eye protection. Hearing protection is recommended. This tool does generate loud and high-pitched noise during operation. If you are using this saw repeatedly, you should wear ear protection. Long or loose hair, neckties, and loose or baggy clothing must be contained. Tie back or tie up hair, roll up long sleeves, tuck in your shirt. A dust mask or respirator may be required for some operations, especially when cutting materials that create a lot of fine dust, such as masonite or MDF materials. Rings, watches, and loose jewelry should not be worn. Gloves should not be worn while operating this tool. If they were to get caught in the blade, it could lead to serious injury. Pre-operational safety checks. Locate and ensure you are familiar with all machine operations and controls. Controls and adjustments may vary from tool to tool, particularly among different manufacturers of the same type of tool. This is the compound miter saw. Compound means it does angles in 2 directions. It does the adjustment here, and the head of the saw can tilt left or right. Not all of them can tilt both directions. This one can actually tilt both directions. The saw operates by just pulling the lever down, and in pulling the lever down, the guard should lift up out of the way. It does that automatically on this saw, and it should do that automatically. And if it does not, you need to report that and not use the saw until it gets fixed. This saw also has adjustments for the miters. You can see that there are little notches here for commonly used angles. There's one for 10 degrees. It goes to 10 and it latches. It goes to 15 and it latches. 45 is the last one on this side. So the way this works is this is a lock. You push down to lock and that will not move. You lift that up and it still will not move because when you're in these divots, you have to lift up this lever. And if you lift up that lever, then it can move. And if you're in between one of those preset angles, you have to lock it like that. Should always lock it even when you're in one of the preset angles because it can hop. Both fences will close, and there's a lever on the back that adjusts that. They close all the way. If you are just doing straight 90-degree cuts, or even doing straight 45, 50-degree cuts on either side, you want those two to be closed because that provides the most support for your lumber. And the more support, the more accurate your cuts. This is the knob that loosens up the fence. The fence can slide in and out to wherever you need it to be. It should always be as far in as possible while still allowing the saw to do its functions and full operations, and then tighten it down. If you wanted to change this to an angle, there's a knob in the back that opens up and spins and turns, and that allows you to rotate this and lock it down. But now that we have changed it to an angle, that's when we need to adjust this fence out in order to allow the guard and the blade to be free and clear to make its complete pass into the lumber. If you want to go the other direction, you loosen up the knob in the back. There's a secondary yellow knob back here. Pull out and it will go the other direction and you can lock. So to illustrate how this works in the back, this is the knob that you loosen up, and when that loosens up, the saw can tilt that way. It can go back to 0 and stop, or you can pull this out and now it can go past 0 the other direction. And when you get it to your desired angle, you lock it. The trigger is here. You can't just automatically pull the trigger. There is a safety. You need to flick it with one of your fingers. The saw also has a backlight. On the top here is a button. You can turn it on and it creates a backlit blade. And as you get closer and closer to the wood, you'll see that there's a shadow of the blade that appears on the wood, telling you exactly where it's going to be cutting. This is the safety on the switch. The trigger will not depress unless you move that safety out of the way. And then once you move the safety out of the way with the first finger or the second finger, whatever's most comfortable, you can now pull the trigger. This switch is your on-off backlight. You turn it on, you turn it off. It has an on-off switch. It doesn't come on automatically. You need to switch it on. And then you need to switch it off when you're done using it. That's the primary functions of the tool. We'll reset it back to normal because we're going to be doing standard cuts only. Ensure the blade guard is present and properly functional. Adjust the guard if it hangs up or does not move freely. Do not operate if guards are missing or faulty. Check your workspaces and walkways to ensure that no slip or trip hazards are present. Pick up cut-off scraps. Sweep up sawdust regularly. Keep the table and the work area clear of all tools, off-cut lumber, and sawdust. Ensure that the saw head spring mechanism returns the saw to the full upright position. If it does not, report the fault to your teacher or supervisor and do not use until it is repaired. Always use the dust bag with portable miter saws or the dust collection system if the saw is attached to one. Operational safety checks. These are safety checks you must be aware of at all times while using the tool, and you must check them and perform them every time you use the tool on every single operation or cut. Always keep your hands away from the saw blade and the cutting head. Keep your hands and fingers at least 6 inches away from the blade and the blade path at all times. The workpiece must be held against the fence at all times while using the saw. Always allow the blade to come to maximum speed before proceeding with the cut. Never start the saw with the blade touching the material. Operate the saw with the right hand whenever possible. Hold the work with the left hand. Do not cross your arms when cutting. Consider repositioning the work so that you do not have to cross your arms to operate the tool. When cutting bowed lumber, always place the convex edge against the fence. If you place the concave edge against the fence, the wood will shift as the saw cuts, causing the wood to bind on the blade. Before clearing waste and debris, switch the tool off and wait for the machine to come to a complete stop. Before making adjustments, switch the tool off and wait for the machine to come to a complete stop. Safe operation of this tool is that you take your wood or your lumber and it has to be up against the back of the fence at all times on both sides, and it needs to be secure. You can operate it with your right hand holding the wood with the left, or you can operate it with your left hand holding the wood with the right. But you need to hold the wood with one hand or the other. Keeping it pressed up against the fence, it needs to be touching the fence all the way along at all times. So make sure it's touching all the way along there. And then you're going to operate it with the other hand. If you are going to line up to a line, you can come down and measure and line it up, but then before you start the tool, you need to back up and not be touching the blade to the wood. The blade has to start not touching the wood. If it starts touching the wood, it's going to throw the wood back at you. So you can start fully up, you can start partway down. It doesn't really matter where you start as long as you're not touching the wood. Pull the safety and then pull the trigger. And you slowly lower into the wood. As with all the tools, you wait for the saw to come to a complete stop before you reach in and you grab any small pieces, or even to remove your large pieces. The saw does have this area here where there's two no hands pictures here, one here and one here. This is the 6-inch no-go zone. Keep your fingers out of the 6-inch no-go zone. No matter what you're doing, your fingers need to be outside of this circle of space. That means that if you are cutting this piece and you need to cut it right here, I can't be holding that with my left hand and operating with my right hand. I have to get my right hand over here and hold it and operate it with my left hand. Or I just turn the wood around, if that works. You need to find the right solution so you're not putting your hands in the no-go zones. We're going to cut any angle just so you can practice moving the miter gauge to a new position. And then you again pull the trigger. Again, waiting for the saw to come to a complete stop before taking out my small pieces. And I recommend you throw your small pieces directly into the trash. Don't put them on the counter and let them pile up here. Because the counter is workspace, you need this space to be clear for setting up your pieces and cutting, so you want that to be available. If I want to do compound miter cuts, I need to slide this one out because I'm only going to go in that one direction. I'm going to adjust the saw to an angle, and I'm going to do compound miter cut. Wait for the saw to come to a complete stop. And now I have these two pieces that are now cut on two angles, and they meet in this strange little way. Again, don't just toss your pieces there. Make sure you have a trash can available. Usually there's a trash can nearby. On one side or the other. Just toss your pieces straight in the trash unless it's something that's big enough to keep, and it's got to be over a foot long to be worth keeping. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of trash. Toss your trash. With this saw, do use the dust collector with it every time you use it. And if you're using it all day, on and off, just turn the dust collector on and leave it on. I'm not using the dust collector during these videos because it's really noisy and you won't be able to hear what I'm saying. One of the more common tasks you will have to do with this saw is cut a lot of repeated cuts of all the same sizes. So I'm going to show you a quick jig that you can set up that will do that. Let's say I have to make several 20-inch cuts. There's my 20-inch cut. If I want to, I can use the tri-square and draw a line. Not as necessary with this saw because, you know, I have this backlight which helps me line up the saw and the wood. I need to have it on the left hand because I'm holding the wood with my left hand and operating with the right. So I'm going to turn on the backlight, adjust the wood so it's lined up. I can even make this first cut. In fact, I probably want to make the first cut. Now, if I want to, I can put the saw into its locked down position. That will help in setting this up. There's a lever in the back, a button that pushes it, and that's for transport. This one's bolted to the table, so it's not transporting, but if you were using this as a portable saw, that's so you could grab it by the handle and carry it, and it's safe and you're not going to hurt yourself with the blade. So now I need to cut a number of repeated cuts this way. So what I can do is I can take any block of wood and I can just screw it to the fence, and that provides a stop for me, and I can just keep putting new pieces of wood into there and it will stop and they will all be exactly the same. Problem with this is that this corner, if any dust gets in there as I'm making all my cuts, it's going to build up and then my boards are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. We have some of these pre-built ones that have a little corner taken off, and that's to allow the sawdust to fall away while you are still having enough of a stop to be able to catch your wood and block it. One screw will work, but two will be better. Sometimes if I go into an old hole, this might shift. There may be old holes in the fence. I'm going to release this. It looks like it's all good. Now I have these other three pieces of wood. I just bring it there, slide it up against the thing. I don't even need the backlight on. And suddenly, I'm making lots of cuts really fast. I'm not measuring each one out. I'm taking the time to do that. There, I've made 4 cuts, all exactly the same size. Really quickly. They're all exactly the same size. Here's an example of a board that has a slight bow to it. I can push that in, but I've got a little bit of a gap here. And what's going to happen if I cut that piece is those two pieces are going to pinch together. And that can bind on the blade and do all kinds of things dangerous and throw the wood back at you, cause the saw to bind, cause the saw to kick, all kinds of stuff. Just flip the board over and that gap is gone. The temptation is to say, well, I can't get it flush here, but I really need that cut to be right where I've got it. I need that cut right there. Better line than that because you draw a straight line. The temptation is to block this out somehow so that I am flush here and here. But that's dangerous because I'm not supported right here at the center of the cut where I need it to be. So don't do this. This is very, very bad. If I need to make this cut and it's got a bow, flip it over and cut it here. It's still going to be the same cut and it's going to slightly bow this way, but it's going to be flush right here and it's going to be 90 degrees right there. Your board may bend by the time it gets out here, it may bend over there, but our cut is going to be accurate if we cut this way. If we cut the other way and we try to block it out or do anything of that nature, it's going to be dangerous and our cut isn't going to be accurate. Here's another example of the bow in the lumber. I'm flush over here, I'm away from the fence here, and I'm flush over there. Again, the temptation is to try to block it away from here so that I can be flush. But the correct answer is to rotate it so that the convex edge and not the concave edge is touching. These are potential hazards to be aware of while operating this tool. This is a cutting tool, so it will be expelling flying chips and sawdust. Chips and sawdust can be propelled at high speeds and cause injury to exposed skin. Always wear protective clothing and PPE. When this tool is in operation, the blade is exposed, presenting a potential point of contact for injury. Always be aware of where the blade is and keep yourself and others away from the blade. Flying chips and sawdust could cause eye injuries. Always wear safety glasses while using this tool. Noise levels can rise above 100 decibels. Protect your ears by wearing hearing protection while using this tool. Do not use faulty equipment. If something is not working properly, or if you suspect something is wrong with the tool or machine, please report this to your instructor and/or to the A&L technical director. If your workpiece is small and you cannot clamp it while using this tool, then do not use this tool to make that cut. Do not use abrasive cutoff blades on miter saws designed for wood cutting. Do not freehand cut. You must always place the wood flat and secure against the fence. As a note of safety, you don't want to cut multiple pieces of wood at the same time on the miter saw or the radial arm saw or the sliding compound miter saw. It's not safe. It's too easy for the pieces to shift around. You're not going to get accurate cuts, and it's just dangerous. Housekeeping. Turn off the machine and return all guards to fully closed positions. Stay with the machine until the blade comes to a complete stop. Remove any cutting stops or jigs. Leave the saw ready for use by the next person. Leave the machine and counter in a safe, clean, and tidy state. Put away off-cut lumber. Toss scraps into the trash bins. Sweep and dust off the counter, the machine, and the floor. Empty the dust bag regularly if the tool has one. It should be emptied when half full. Dust off the counter, dust off the tool, blow some compressed air in and around here, get all the sawdust out. Lots of sawdust likes to build up back here. Even though you're using a dust collector, you will be using this dust collector, which is right below, designed for this. Sweep out the floor, and actually these two levers and this one, they allow the saw to come out to be swept and cleaned. We have a portable Makita miter saw. It's a little bit older, so it's a little bit funkier to use. It's not as smooth in making miter adjustments and using all the other features. And it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, but it gets the job done. And when you're doing a lot of work in the shop, this will come in handy so you're not creating a big long line waiting to chop your lumber at the miter saw or at the radial arm saw. It has all the same features as the other saws. It's got a lock here. This is in storage position for transport. It's got a handle so you can carry it, pick it up and carry it away. It's got the lever here. If you push down on this and pull the lever out, it comes up and now it's ready to be used. When it comes down, the guard lifts up out of the way. It has a safety here. The trigger will not press unless your thumb is pushing in on the safety. It has a dust bag for collecting your dust. And it does have miter adjustments here. This is the part that is really sticky because of its age and its style and design. You loosen this up and there are no locking divots to regular angles. And coming back to zero is a challenge, again, because there's no locking divot. I'm trusting this arrow being on zero. You might want to get a tri-square and confirm before committing to that being a perfect zero if you need it to be a perfect zero. This is the sliding compound miter saw.
The difference between this one and the miter saw is this can cut slightly wider materials by the fact that it can slide out, it can cut down, and cut back. And it looks like this can cut something about almost 12 inches wide. So this can cut wider stuff. It's kind of a middle ground tool between the miter saw and the radial arm saw. And in fact, the sliding miter saws are actually making the radial arm saws a little bit more rare and taking the place of them because they can cut up to 12 inches or sometimes wider than that. The radial arm saw can cut 24 inches, the one we have, but there are very few manufacturers of radial arm saws, and there's a lot of manufacturers of sliding compound miter saws.
The sliding compound miter saw has all the same guidelines and safety procedures as the miter saw or the compound miter saw, but with these two additional guidelines. During slide cutting, always push the blade away from the operator. This is exactly the opposite of the safe operation of the radial arm saw, with both tools having tracking cutting heads. The difference is that the radial arm saw has a spring-loaded cable that tracks the head back into place away from the operator and the work. The sliding compound miter saw does not have that feature and would likely kick back at you if you cut by pulling toward yourself. Never pull the slide toward the operator while cutting. Always push away from yourself in a single, smooth motion. This is the sliding compound miter saw. It's very similar to the regular compound miter saw. It has all the same features. It can just do straight miter cuts, just like that. You can adjust the miter to go at various miters. We have a dust collector for it as well, down here. Always use the dust collector. The catch with this is that you can cut wider boards than the compound miter saw. The compound miter saw can only just cut down like that. But the sliding compound miter saw can slide forward and can cut down, and you can now cut a wider board. But unlike the radial arm saw, you don't cut down and pull forward. With the sliding compound miter saw, the correct action is to pull forward, go down, and push in. So the sliding compound miter saw does not have that saw mechanism that automatically retracts it back the way the radial arm saw does. It's not going to want to control if you pull it out in the same way that you do the radial arm saw. You want to start fully out and go in. This board is about 8 inches. It should be too wide to do your normal cut. I'll try doing just a normal cut. The guard won't even go down all the way and allow me to cut through fully. I need to pull forward. I need to down. And I've made my cut. You are able to lock this into place so that it can only go down and do just straight miter cuts. If you were only doing 1x3 and small stuff, you might want to do that so it doesn't travel along so much. So like the compound miter saw, these adjust, but they should be all the way in. If you are doing your regular miter cuts and not doing compound miters. So if you're doing your regular cross cuts, your wood will have the most support if they are all the way in. There is a lockdown device that you're welcome to use. Hold your wood in place. And same thing with the miter saw. 6-inch no-go zone. Don't put your fingers there. Wait until the saw comes to a complete stop before removing your scrap pieces. This one is the one I have at home. It's a cordless one. It has an 18-volt battery, but it's a 9 amp hour, which means it lasts longer than the standard 5-6 amp hour batteries that are part of most of the other tools. Makita makes several cordless miter saws as well. They usually take 2 batteries, but Milwaukee has it so that the battery has 9 and they have a 12 amp hour battery, just a bigger battery with a longer life. In this case, the saw has a dust bag that gets removed. I don't have a dust collection system, and again, when the dust bag gets half full, that's the time to empty it with any saw with a dust bag.